Uh, f- First of all, I'd just like to thank Ramon for accommodating us today. We have a scheduled NEDA board meeting at 1 o'clock, and we have about 7 huge socioeconomic projects to approve. And so the president has, it normally takes about 4 to 5 hours, so there's really no way for us. Many of the cabinet secretaries, when they go before the president, they think it's oral examinations. So everybody has to prepare, and Babes has some of those projects to present. First and foremost, all of you here deserve a warm round of applause for the successful second Integrity Summit. This only signifies your commitment to bring about a new culture of integrity in the business community, particularly as you relate with us, your partners in government. We know that government cannot deliver on its mandates without the private sector as its partners. For one, we procure from you the goods and services that we need in delivering services to our people. But more fundamentally, we must concede that the role of increasing economic productivity, creating jobs, and improving income rests in the hands of the private sector. Of course, by private sector, we mean not only you, those in the private business, but even those in the communities who do microfinance work. Of course, we need to do our part of the deal by enabling you through a fair, competitive, stable, and predictable business and policy environment. We also know that if we transact and relate to each other in a quote-unquote business as usual fashion, we as a country will not move forward. This is why we need to develop new relations of integrity between the public and the private sectors. And that is why we admire the Integrity Initiative. It shows that the private sector is not only after the profit motive, which is certainly legitimate, but private motive, whatever it takes, that is a problem. Please allow me to share some reflections on what in the bureaucracy or the Department of Budget and Management integrity is all about from the way we look at it. We often associate integrity with adherence to ethical standards and morality, in particular with aligning what we say and what we do. And true enough, the success so far of the Integrity Initiative lies in how it has propagated the value of sticking to one's word, as represented by the Integrity Pledge. But we also need to look at another dimension of integrity. We can surface this by looking at how various professions talk about integrity. Engineers and architects, for one, talk about structural integrity. That is, the infrastructure, if the infrastructure that they design, construct, and assess are complete and are thus safe and strong. Statisticians, accountants, and financial analysts, on the other hand, talk about the integrity of their data. In other words, the reliability, accuracy, and trustworthiness of the information that they process. Programmers, software designers, and ICT specialists, meanwhile, ensure that the software and information systems they develop have integrity, that these are resilient to intrusion. In other words, integrity is not only about being unblemished or honest or even sinless. It is also about installing the appropriate systems and structures that actually work. Relative to government, the late Secretary Jesse Robredo constantly emphasized that while it is important to appoint good people in government, it is equally important to build systems and structures that enable or even force people to be good. We pursue reform not only to get rid of corruption. We also want to simply make sure that public institutions work and deliver on their mandates, whether as fair mediators of competing interests, as efficient redistributors of wealth through the delivery of basic services, and as effective facilitators and enablers of economic productivity and job generation. But in our pursuit of reform, we need to be aware that informal parallel structures are embedded in our public institutions. Dr. Robert Klitgard, in a visit and an engagement with the cabinet, describes such parallel structures like the mafia, which through the years have developed an intricate network of various players: politicians, bureaucrats, media, oligopolistic businesses, and other vested interests. Michael Johnston, meanwhile, described this as a syndrome of oligarchs, of quote-unquote oligarchs and clans, where a few families have control over wealth and power. Many scholars have described this widespread phenomenon as the culture of patronage, a situation where ordinary people, especially the poor, are shackled in relationships of dependence with their patrons. The patron's ability to stay in power and keep his client's loyalty is a function of how he is able to influence the resource allocation and decision-making of public institutions. It is also a function of how he is able to build political capital by securing the cooperation of the elites in the bureaucracy and those with narrow vested economic interest. Politics then becomes the patron's guarantee of sustaining access and influence. This decades-old problem has sustained a basic structural problem of our society, where wealth and power are concentrated in the hands of a few. Sadly, this problem became all the more embedded in the previous administration, where patronage relationships were consciously allowed to be entrenched for the sake of political survival. Let me be concrete about this. For example, on starting a business, according to the Global Competitiveness Index of 2012 to 2013, government continues to let you go through 15 business startup procedures. On this indicator, we have been ranked 137th out of 144 countries. You may wonder, what is the rationale for the tedious process before you can operate, when it is in our interest that you establish your businesses here? We say it's to protect our country's interests. But frankly, these 15 procedures may just as well serve as 15 entry points for the city hall clerk to extort you, or for the local politician to offer his help in exchange for you-know-what, or even for a local businessman to prevent you from eating into his market. And more often than not, that bureaucrat is there because he may be a protege of a politician, or the local businessman may be thriving because of the protection from the bureaucrat and the politician. And that politician may be thriving because the bureaucrat and the local businessman bankroll his campaign kitty. And in some cases, the politician or bureaucrat might also be the businessman himself. Let's look at another example, public construction, which Secretary Singson and other panelists discussed with you earlier. You and I know that in the past, the mafia has influenced the process from project initiation even all the way to audit. Their influence goes from skewing project design to suit favored contractors, to to political quote-unquote sponsorship of a project, whether or not it is economically sound, to collusion and price fixing among the bidders, to colluding with bids committee members, and to poor oversight during implementation, leading to weak transparency and accountability. In other words, this situation simply does not and will not and cannot work. Patronage disables integrity. It disables integrity when it imbalances the playing field to the disadvantage of those who simply want a fair chance at success, business-wise or otherwise. For public institutions to work, not only for your advantage, but for the whole nation's collective benefit, reform should lead to dismantling patronage. To succeed, we need to pursue certain imperatives. First, leadership from the top must be committed to restore people's trust in government and its formal institutions. On this first imperative, we know that we have been succeeding. Starting day one, when our people vanquished hopelessness and desperation, relieved the spirit of people power, this time in the electoral arena, and gave President Aquino an unprecedented mandate. To date, he continues to enjoy record-high public satisfaction and trust levels. More important, his reform mandate has also lifted the trust levels of key public institutions, such as the Cabinet, Congress, and even the Supreme Court. This political capital will be critical as we continue to embark on difficult but necessary reforms in our society. We cannot waste this, and so the President has been investing this into an agenda of open government, of embedding transparency, citizens' participation, and accountability in the very systems and processes of government. This leads to the second imperative to reform, to strengthen public institutions, to be resilient against intrusion, and ultimately to effectively perform and deliver results with impact. Delivering results with impact makes institutional and bureaucratic reforms necessary. Here we have seen that the President has been exercising both moral and political leadership, not only in pursuing high-profile corruption cases, but also in curing institutional weaknesses. We have a plan, the Good Governance and Anti-Corruption Plan from 2012 to 2016, in pursuit of embedding openness, transparency, accountability, and citizens' participation in governance. This plan also includes our commitments to the Global Open Government Partnership. This plan includes the digitization of information flows and financial processes, installing a performance-based budgeting and incentives scheme, and pursuing the long-term agenda of re-engineering government. By the way, I wish to note two initiatives that we included under this plan. First, the business sector-led and government-supported implementation of the Integrity Initiative, and the formation of a multi-stakeholder mechanism. We call this the Philippine Open Government Partnership for the implementation of our open government reform initiatives. The Integrity Initiative belongs to this partnership, and Ramon Del Rosario sits in its interim steering committee. This leads to the last imperative, building a constituency for reform. Here is where we assert that government cannot succeed unless it adopts a new tradition of openness. This is about deepening our partnerships with civil society, people's organization, the private sector, and other reform stakeholders. This is about building a consolidated constituency for reform, a parallel structure that will countervail the forces of patronage. The motivation behind this is people power. We desire to transform it from a form of nonviolent regime change towards a paradigm for progress through the active and meaningful participation of citizens in governance, not just in the voting booths every 3 years, not just in the streets, but in the less dramatic but nonetheless equally important day-to-day challenges of governance and public service. We seem to be on the right track. The President continues to enjoy historically high levels of public satisfaction and trust. The Philippines, as earlier reported, also recently leapt by 20 places to number 65 in the Global Competitive Index since we assumed power. Economically, we've also been able to push gross domestic product growth to 6.1% in the first half. We are committed to build on these gains, and we are committed to deepen our partnership with the private sector in pursuit of integrity and open government. As we wish to be in a relationship of integrity with you, allow us to be upfront on our proposal to require bidders for government procurement contracts to first sign integrity pacts to be eligible. We agree that we need to incentivize and even give an advantage to businesses which are committed to implement integrity and to penalize those which break ethical standards, or those who belong to the mafia. That is why we are seriously considering this proposal. Unfortunately, we are somewhat legally constrained. Our procurement law binds us from introducing any requirement that could limit the extent of competition. This is not to say that we are ending this conversation, really, or that we are killing your proposal. And so I wish to open this conversation with you today in the open forum and in our follow-through communications on what we can do together to pursue this potential high-impact reform. By way of concluding, we have often been asked, your initiatives are all good, but how will this be sustained and become irreversible in the next 3 years and 9 months and in the next administration? I believe that the first step that we must do is to ensure that there is widespread and sustained clamor or demand for transparency, engagement, and accountability in our society. Not just by the business community, as you're gathered here, but even among civil society organizations, the academe, the media, our development partners, among others. Second, I believe we have to deeply embed good governance measures so that they become the policies, the institutions, and processes of government. Third, we have to ensure that these measures actually bring direct, immediate, and substantial benefit to our people by way of adequate basic social and economic services and inclusive and sustained growth. And reversing our course endangers the availability of these gains and lead to serious economic and political consequences for those who attempt to reverse them. Ultimately, these social and economic reforms must lead to changes in our political culture so that patronage and dependency are supplanted by performance and empowerment as the dominant currency for electing our political leaders. Thank you and good afternoon.
Please sit down, sir. One or two questions, but he has to run right afterwards. I will toss the first question. Secretary Abad, how would you gauge the progress you've made and what needs to happen in the next, while you're still in office? How do you ensure it continues after that?
Well, you know, one of the things that we have been doing, our core function as the DBM, as a guardian of public expenditure management, is we have laid out a public financial management roadmap. And so this means reforming policies. For example, by 2014, the DBM will not stand between the budget and the execution of projects. Because in 2014, once the budget is approved, it will be immediately executory. There will be no issuances of release orders or agency budget matrices. And that's going to be a big change because that will accelerate budget execution. But to do that, we need to introduce further necessary changes. For example, we have prohibited the submission of lump sum budgets in the budget in 2013. All agencies are required to obligate all their appropriations on the year that they receive them, so that if they do not, then they forfeit their budget. And we will start with the procurement process early. For example, for the infrastructure projects next year, we have started the process of procurement this year. In fact, all our infrastructure projects for 2013 should have been bidded out short of being awarded in November this year, so that on the first day of the new year, next year, then those projects can then be awarded and issued notices to proceed. So that's a big change. We are also going through a process of automating our processes, so that when agencies next year submit their budgets, they will have to submit their budgets digitally, and so that will also accelerate that process. And this year, we have started the process. We have started piloting in 6 agencies the national payroll system, so that payroll next year will be received directly by the employees, not from their agencies, the cash, but from the National Treasury direct to their bank accounts. And remittances to GSIS and the Bureau of Internal Revenue will be made directly from the Treasury direct to these agencies. You know, just recently we signed an agreement with GSIS and DepEd to finally end that problem, where about almost 700,000 teachers have been unable to avail of their GSIS privileges simply because GSIS premiums were not remitted. And, you know, the GSIS was charging us something like 25 billion in unpaid remittances and interest payments, but we entered into an arrangement. So our 700,000 almost 700,000 teachers now enjoy their GSIS benefits. So we are continuing that process. We are also piloting with the Armed Forces of the Philippines. When we came into government, about 46% of the disbursements of the AFP were cash advances. So this year we're going to start an experiment, which a model that we copied from the U.S. Armed Forces, of using cashless purchase cards. You know, sometimes the soldiers were saying, you know, when we're out there in the field, you know, we need cash, and you know, all sorts of reasons. So we are addressing these problems with the digitization. And we have also started the process of broadening the participation of the people in the budget process. For the budget next year, we started what is called the bottom-up budgeting exercise with about 609 municipalities. We started this year a process of determining budgets not from the central offices, but in close consultation with municipalities. So these are the reforms that, because they need cooperation of people, they require collaboration with government agencies. We feel that once they are in place, they will be very difficult to reverse.
You're being
Maria.
very transparent, and the processes that you're putting in place are fantastic. But
By the way, we have also uploaded the pork barrel allocations and disbursements of our politicians in the DBM budget. So you look at budgetnambayan.com, and if you want to find out where your favorite congressman puts his 70 million pesos every year, it's in our website.
I was going to say that there is a tremendous amount of data at the DBM website now, but fundamental to what you want to do, dismantling patron-client relationships, is actually a change not just in the culture, but also a change in the individual values of the people who are driving that change. That's really, really tough. How do you, aside from the systems that you're putting in place that stop the outside, how do you, even among the decision makers, how do you, our culture actually lends itself in many instances to patron-client relationships, issues of trust, friends, family, very important. How do you deal with these things? How do you deal with changing values that are counterculture?
Well, that's really one of the major challenges that we face right now. It's really the problem of execution, because it is true that while we have been able to change the leadership at the top, we still have to manage with the bureaucracy that, for 9.5 years had to endure a lot of the abuses and the excesses of the past, and many of them traumatized to a point where it is always better and safer not to do anything.
Correct.
And so every time that we then try to introduce change, the mentality of people is that, these guys will only be here for some time, but we will be here forever.
Days.
And so they always, think very hard whether, in fact, this is really what we ought to be doing, or should we just wait, because these are difficult changes. And, it's not just difficult, but they're dangerous changes, because in many instances, they need to expose people who have committed or have abused their official positions over the past years. And they're not about to do that, especially if they're about to retire or if they're now enjoying the possibility of getting promoted. So the inertia that we've had to deal with when we started continues. And I think what greatly helps, as Babes earlier said, was they're seeing that, the leadership is serious about this. The people who are in the cabinet are serious about this. And I think they also realize that they feel good about it when they're seeing that they're empowered, when they're seeing that they're being recognized for their effort. That's why the President this year instituted a performance-based bonus system which will provide the lowliest employees as much as 35,000 pesos if he or she belongs to the top 10% of the bureaucracy that has done well, based on what we call major final output that have been defined by concrete indicators. So we have to combine both incentives as well as these difficult reforms, to get especially the middle management of the bureaucracy moving. And with that, I would just like to, I hear the plates and the spoons, and I want to stop here and thank Ramon and all of you for giving us this opportunity to engage you. This will not stop here, because even if you don't call us, we will be calling on you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Abad. Well, you have your food in front of you, hopefully coming out soon. The afternoon session will be moderated by a colleague of mine at Rappler, Chai Hofilenya, who also ran the ethics program for ABS-CBN. She will take over. Your keynote for the afternoon is also power-packed. Chief Justice Sereno will be coming to give us our keynote this afternoon. Lunch will be from 12:30 to 1:30 now. And please let us thank Globe for the free Wi-Fi in the ballroom. Have a great lunch, everyone. Thank you.